Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We are broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and folks, on TikTok. Please do send in your greetings. Please tell us where you are watching from. And please tell us what you think of today's news, which we're going to be discussing in some depth. And we're going to be asking you for your opinions as well. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, had her first national budget, and it's been a controversial one. And there's things that we're going to be talking about regarding it. So stick around for that. We're also going to be looking at the latest population figures for Scotland, and the population is exploding at a level that you will believe if you live in the cities, but you might not believe if you live in your Button Ben up north. And it's very disturbing, actually, in many ways. And we're going to be looking at the official figures of people who have come into Scotland in the last recorded period. And then we're also going to be looking at our latest research for volume 2 of A Big Book for the Union, which was looking at the numbers who have indeed been accepted for settlement in the United Kingdom, going back to when records began in 1960. A lot of really good in-depth research that we've been doing on that matter. And we're going to be talking about that tonight. Also, at the bottom of the hour, we're going to have our competition. Stick around for that as well. We'll have our On This Day in British History, and then we always ask a question. And the winner of the question will get sent a copy of A Wee Book for the Union, along with your very own Union Jack bookmark. How does that sound? And it's easy enough to enter our competition, folks. You simply send an email to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and we announce the winner at the end of the show, just a little bit before 8 o'clock. So a lot of things to talk about tonight. Are you going to be impacted by the minimum wage? Are you going to be impacted by inheritance tax? Are you going to be impacted in any other way by the budget? What's your thoughts? Do send them in, and we will read them out. We'll do the best that we can to read out your comments. Chuckles says the best bit about today's budget was when she said she'd be taxing those who use private jets to fly to California. That's right. She had a little bit of a dig at Jeremy Hunt, who got into a little bit of an issue because he used a chartered plane to fly to the Tory conference, I believe. So she was having a wee joke at his expense on that one, which seemed to go down well. Fantastic. Send in your comments, folks, on TikTok, and we'll read them out. Let's say hello to some people here. Who was first in tonight? Derek Hart says, good evening to Alistair and the AFFG family. We had a great stall on Saturday. Let's talk about that. TC says, good evening to all fellow unionists everywhere. Good to see Kat in the house. Hi to you, and hi to Oksana. And Debbie says she's just made it. She's been to Glasgow. Fantastic. Debbie had a day out in the great British city of Glasgow, apparently. Good, good. Glad you got home safely. Hi to British legends. And to Catherine and to Alan. Good evening to Alan. Derek says, what about the population of the whole of the United Kingdom? It's not just in Scotland that has exploded. Absolutely. Absolutely, Derek. We're flagging up the increase in the Scottish population because it really is quite something for those of us who live here to discover. It flew under the radar. It was released. The information was released back on the 8th of October, and we've only discovered it today. So it was kept fairly quiet, but somebody sent us a cutting and we were shocked, but you'll be shocked too. Let's talk firstly about our fantastic street stall that Derek mentioned there. Now, we like to go into the heart of the great British city of Glasgow at least once a month if we can. And we were out last Saturday with our stall, and it was one of the best days that we've ever had with our stall. And I want to say thank you to the table team who came out, and I want to say thank you to all those who came up to the table to wish us the very best. Let's take a look at some of our pictures that we took on that day. Let's bring up the first one here. Okay. That is our new banner. And it says, "We heart the great British city of Glasgow." And there's our website, aforceforgood.uk. That's a colourful banner. You couldn't miss that if you're walking along looking at it. And let's go to the next picture. There we go. Busy like that. It was just busy for 4 hours straight. Or we were there for actually longer than that, but it was just busy. People coming up. We had a lot on our stall. We give away our magazines for free. We had other various items there, including our wee book for the union and so on. Okay. And that was one of our flags on a 5-meter flagpole. You couldn't miss that. And okay. And that was on a 6-meter flagpole. And somebody said to us that they could see that from the very end of Argyle Street, and they wondered what it was about, and they came all the way down to see us. That says Britain remembers at this time of remembrance. Okay. There's the two of them flying together. It's difficult to catch those, to get good shots of them both unfurled, but the weather was kind to us and we got some good pictures. Okay. I like this one, which was taken by a colleague, and it has compressed the background there. That's actually it's a considerable distance. It's several hundred yards, but it's compressed it, and you can see there's our two main flags, and there was also a pro-Palestinian demo outside Barclays Bank, and you can see some of their flags in the background as well. But I think that's quite an artistic shot. Okay. There's one of our legends. That's James with myself. James is a great activist, has been with us since we began in 2012. Okay. And there's the dream team, or part of the dream team, standing at the table, all looking very pleased with ourselves, I must say, with our new banner. Okay. Fantastic. So that was our street stall. We always like to get out and say hello to the public. And if you'd like to join us at any of these events, simply drop us an email at contact@aforceforgood.uk, and we will definitely tell you about it and see if you can join us. And even if you don't like speaking to the public, then you don't have to. Just stand about with us. Just stand about with us and chat with us, you know. And it's important that we have as many people at the stall as possible. So, and you don't have to stay for the whole period as well. You can just drop in for an hour or so, say hello, stand up for keep the British end up, as we like to say. So yeah, we're always looking for people to stand about with us at the table, and we'll be back out sometime in November as well. But I tell you something, once it gets into November, that's a chilly job, standing around. Oh, that's a chilly job. Anyway, we do it for you. We absolutely do. Looking at the views on TikToks. Chuckle says the budget today, good news for Glasgow, Wales and Northern Ireland. Yes, let's talk about the budget. As far as Scotland is concerned, I noticed that Rachel Reeves mentioned, and I did make a note of this, that there was going to be 3.4 billion was going to be made available to Scotland through the Barnett formula. And that would be given to Scotland in the 25-26 tax year, as I understood what she was saying. Given to Scotland actually means given to the SNP, unfortunately, if they get their grubby hands on it. So I'm hoping that that will be money that will get given to councils and that will somehow find its way around the SNP's grubby hands, because we can't trust the SNP really to handle that 3.4 billion with any degree of competency. And when they get it, they'll pretend that it was from them in the first place. And so it was mentioned a city deal and a growth deal for Argyll and Bute. So there'll be more information about that, no doubt, in the future. But 3.4 billion for Scotland, can't sneeze at that. As we always say, the union is the best insurance policy that we could possibly have. Apart from that, though, I noticed that Rachel Reeves was getting pelters from various people regarding her budget. She has done something with inheritance tax, and we would like people, if it affects, or if you understand exactly what it is, then please do tell us. But she appears to have made pensions subject to inheritance tax. So our understanding of that is if you die and you've got an awful lot of money in your pension pot still to be used, then that will be taxed at the inheritance tax rate, which is pretty extortionate. And the reason a lot of people say inheritance tax should be abolished, and I personally believe that also, because you've gone through your whole life paying taxes on everything, and then when you die, you get taxed on being dead. And the money that you might have managed to take to your last day, all of that's getting cleaned out as well by the government. And there is an ideological reason for this. Inheritance tax was first proposed by Karl Marx. And the idea was to prevent people passing their wealth down through their family, because it was thought that inheritance, that sort of family wealth would keep inequality going. So the idea was to stop rich people from passing their wealth on and maintaining this inequality. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can literally read the Communist Manifesto, which I have here, and we got it from our library and I checked it, and here it is under chapter 2 of the Communist Manifesto, where Karl Marx talks about various things. And he says, in the most advanced countries, the following will be pretty generally applicable. Number one, abolition of property in land, which means you can't own land, I presume. An application of all rents of land to public purposes. In other words, land rents go to the public purse. Well, we don't exactly have that in total yet, but his second proposal, you may have heard before, a heavy progressive or graduated income tax. Well, that certainly got brought in after the Communist Manifesto was written. And the third one is the abolition of all right of inheritance. And so it was after the Communist Manifesto that we began to get this so-called inheritance tax. And it does really just show you that this whole idea of left and right is a bit kind of ridiculous, because if the Tories were actually right wing, then they would have abolished inheritance tax long ago, wouldn't they have? And they would probably have abolished income tax as well, which I'm also all for. And I'll tell you why. Because we literally live in a world where sovereign governments can create money out of nothing. Now, if a sovereign government can create money out of nothing, ask yourself this: why do we have taxes at all? Oh, Alistair, you can't say that. Well, I can say that. I can say that because that's puzzled me since I was very small. And I'm not going to stop saying it. Now, I can understand that there are various reasons why you would want to take money out of the economy and why taxes in some cases are a good idea. But so many taxes could actually be abolished, and you could find other ways of raising the money. And interestingly, Donald Trump said last week that he thought about abolishing income tax altogether, because in America, income tax only came in, and I'm not going to give you a date on this, but it was sometime in the early 20th century, I'm going to say, possibly after the Federal Reserve had been created, but don't quote me on that. Anyway, it's a modern tax, is my point, a modern tax. And so you could abolish it. And he was suggesting that you simply abolish income tax and you replace it with tariffs, which is to say that if China wants to sell goods in your American market or your British market, you put up tariffs, which means they have to pay a cost before their goods get allowed in. And you can use that money to fund public services. Again, tariffs might not pay for everything that's needed, but it would go a very long way to paying for things. But the tariff argument never gets used. And it never gets used because our useless politicians have resigned themselves to the idea of globalization, that not only do physical borders have to be open, but also economic borders have to be open, and that it's not appropriate to put up tariffs. Well, I deign to disagree. And I think we're heading into a period where all of that has to get rethought. And you always hear as well about, oh, we mustn't upset the markets. Well, who are the markets? The markets are real people who are making a lot of money from this. So what you really say when you say you shouldn't upset the markets is you shouldn't upset all the rich people who are making billions from the way that the Western world's economy is presently structured. Well, maybe we should change that. Maybe we shouldn't listen to them so much. Maybe we should find out who these people are. Maybe we should just ignore them, But the whole modern economic system just runs as a kind of it's an illusion in many ways, and it's just held together by politicians not wanting to upset the apple cart and wanting to make sure that the very, very, very wealthy continue to be wealthy. And governments couldn't just create money out of nothing. Well, why couldn't they? Well, the way it works at present is government borrows money from very rich corporations and people and then pays that money back to them with interest. So clearly, those very rich corporations and people have a vested interest in maintaining the way that money is created at present, because they're making a serious amount of money from the way that governments have to raise finance. But every government in the world has the ability to raise its own finance without going to the corporations and the rich people. And that's just actually common sense, and it really needs to be better known, that fact. Anyway, we're stuck with this whole taxing people and keeping us all enslaved under the economic system as it is presently constructed. We're stuck with that at the moment until a political party comes along and asks me to advise their economic policy. Let's have a look at some comments. Mark says, nothing good is going to come of this Labour government. I put them on a par with the Scottish nationalists. Steady Eddie says, one world globalist NWO EU absolutely loathes the idea of independent nations and their identities. That's true. Eric says about inheritance tax, it should be voluntary. There's a thought. If the recently deceased person is willing to leave some money to the Treasury, then that's fair enough. Not stealing it because no government has money, just the money from the citizens. Well, as I say, governments can create money out of nothing. Where did all the billions for COVID come from? It was really just created. There you go. In the United Arab Emirates, you don't pay income tax. And absolutely, Eric also says that increasing national insurance for employers isn't good for the employers, because with national insurance, there's the national insurance that the employee has to pay. Apparently, that's just been frozen. That's not changed. But the employer has to pay national insurance for every employee on top of the amount of money that goes to pay the employee's wage. So if you put up the national insurance for employers, that could have consequences for the employees, because the employer might not be able to employ you anymore. So that's also got to be thought through as well, and whether it has or not remains to be seen. So as Catherine says, it's probably not good for businesses. Again, somebody else believes that Labour is just like the SNP cult and cannot be trusted, says British Legends. And Oksana says, all tax should be voluntary because tax is theft. I do agree with that. And if one likes to pay tax, then knock yourself out, knock yourself out. If you don't want to pay tax, then maybe you shouldn't be forced into it. But certainly tax is a way of controlling people, controlling their behaviors, and also making sure that they don't get too powerful as well. Along with that, Oksana says that capital gains tax and stamp duty should be abolished. And Steady Eddie gives us a bit of a black pill here. He says, we are not voting our way out of a corrupt system. Well, I know what you mean, Steady Eddie, but it's not as if there's a whole lot of other options left to us. So, and there's a lot in the democratic system that's not properly been brought out yet, in the sense that a lot of parties just are lacking originality and are not coming up with like really good ideas, such as why are we paying tax in the first place? If a party actually came out and started saying that, then things would change. The Overton window would start to shift. People would start to question things that they've held as as gospel, as it were, all their lives. And yeah, we are taxed to death, quite literally. And then when you die, you get taxed again, and your children get taxed as well. It is a joke. Is there much more that we want to say about Rachel Reeves, other than have you heard the joke about the constipated chancellor? She couldn't budget. So let's talk about something a little bit more exciting. We'll tell you what we'll do. We'll go straight into our On This Day in British History. On this day, the 30th of October in 1979 was the day that the British inventor Barnes Wallis passed away. And you probably know that name because he is the inventor of that great contribution to humanity, otherwise known as the bouncing bomb, that caused great havoc indeed in World War II. And we do really only know about this guy because of the famous film, The Dam Busters. And he was played so perfectly by the actor Michael Redgrave. And it was Michael Redgrave that made this guy a household name, basically, that made Barnes Wallis a household name, even though his particular invention might, in many ways, it would perhaps have been better if he had maybe put it into, I don't know, something perhaps less destructive, but nevertheless, he does hold an important position, as it were, in the memory of people who remember World War II. Let's stick a picture up of this guy to show you what he actually looked like. Let's get him up here. Barnes Wallis. There we go. That's the bloke there on the left in the white jacket, and that's the actor there, Michael Redgrave, on the right. And there is a sort of resemblance, but apparently when they initially met, Wallis was skeptical of the casting, and he said to Redgrave, "You have to be joking. You're much too young and good looking to play me." But in the event, of course, as we know, Redgrave gave such a masterful performance that he turned Barnes Wallis into a household name. And Barnes Wallis died on this day, the 30th of October in 1979, and he's buried at St. Lawrence Church in Effingham in Surrey. And there's also a statue to him in Herne Bay, and there he is looking out over the sea, no doubt at the Lancasters flying by, trying to drop the bombs to see if they'll bounce, and then getting very annoyed when they don't bounce, if I remember the film correctly. That's the man. That is Barnes Wallis on this day in British history. I'll ask you a question about that in a moment. Let's check out some comments. Catherine talks about the budgets. She says they don't want sole traders or small businesses. That's absolutely true. Somebody also said to me that they're they're doing some kind of tax on agricultural land as well. So when you sell a farm, and farms now are very expensive, and there's fewer and fewer of them, and they're bigger and bigger. So virtually most farms are going to get caught within the inheritance tax threshold. And what that means is that whereas normally a farmer might have passed it down to their family, after the inheritance tax has been taken off, it might not even be feasible for the family to take on the farm. And what will then happen is they'll have to sell it. And who's going to buy it? Well, we know in America, groups like BlackRock, these massive venture capitalist companies, the people that our politicians bow to, they're going to buy it up. And then BlackRock, I'm thinking worst case scenario here, of course. Worst case scenario, BlackRock buy it up. And before they know it, they're deciding what goes into the plants, what goes into the animals, what we're allowed to eat, etc., etc., etc. So any country that really values freedom will have a lot of these small farmers, the peasant class, as it were, farming the land. That ultimately gives more and more freedom to people. The smaller the farms, in many ways, the better if you can arrange an economy around all of that. But the way it is now, of course, everything's getting centralized, and the big corporations like BlackRock are coming in and dominating the scene. And I don't want to blackpill you too much tonight, but I'm just pointing out that land grab, as Catherine describes it. Alan says a few small business owners have been calling into local radio that he listens to, saying they're not now going to hire more people and expand. And that's in consequence of the budget today. So Labour will have to realise that, you know, you've got to keep the entrepreneurs going, you've got to keep the small businesses going, and the only people who benefit from high taxes are the very big companies that can weather it, and the very, very rich people. And so socialism doesn't always work. It often can end up only helping the mega rich who are able to move in after the other people have been wiped out of the market. And in that regard, extreme socialism and extreme capitalism can find common ground. Now, I'm going to ask a question about on this day in British history. Please send your answers to contact@aforceforgood.uk. The winner will get this copy of a wee book for the Union, and also a bookmark, a Union Jack bookmark. Check that out. Send your answers to contact@aforceforgood.uk. Let's get the address up there. Good. Now the question is, on this day in British history, the inventor of the bouncing bomb passed away. What was his name? Send your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and we'll announce the winner at the top of the hour, and you could get yourself a wee book for the Union along with a Union Jack bookmark. Fantastic. Now, folks, I want to tell you about this research that we were doing today. We discovered that the population of Scotland is growing faster than at any time since the 1940s. And it's not just us saying that, it's the Daily Telegraph. Scotland growing faster than any time since 40s. And this is from the Daily Telegraph of the 9th of October 2024. Scotland's population has surged faster than at any time since the 1940s, owing to record net immigration, according to official figures. National Records of Scotland said that a total of 82,800 people moved from abroad into Scotland between June 22 and June 23. In that 12-month period, June 22 to June 23, the latest period that we have got figures for, 82,800 people moved from abroad into Scotland. That's the gross figure. The net figure, if you subtract emigration going out of Scotland abroad, and for our Scottish national friends, abroad means outside of the United Kingdom. It doesn't mean Carlisle and Yorkshire, okay? It means outside of the United Kingdom. 47,700 net, or 82,800 gross. Now, let's put those figures into some kind of perspective, okay? Let's look at the gross figure, 82,800 in a 12-month period of time. Now, we're told by National Records of Scotland, who released this information on the 8th of October, that the last time the population was growing so fast was in 1947. So what I thought I'd do is I'd look up Wikipedia and find out what are the populations of Scotland's towns and cities, to give you some idea of what 82,800 people into Scotland in a 12-month period looks like. And these figures are on Wikipedia, and they use the National Records of Scotland figures, the latest National Record of Scotland figures. Now, there's only 4 places in Scotland that have a bigger population than 82,800. And these are in order: Glasgow, Edinburgh, Aberdeen, and Dundee. But that figure of 82,800 is more than the 5th most populous town in Scotland, which is Paisley, which comes in at a considerably fewer 77,000. Okay, so a bigger population than Paisley came into Scotland in a 12-month period. Those are the latest figures that we have for the period 22 to 23. A bigger population than the 5th largest town in Scotland came into the country from abroad in 12 months. In the 12 months between June 22 and June 23, a new population of people came into Scotland bigger than its 5th most popular town, considerably bigger than its 5th most popular town, or 8,000 more people than the next most populous town, which is East Kilbride, which comes in around about 75,000, or 26,000 more people than the next most populous town, which is Livingston, which comes in around about 57,000, or about 28,000 more than the next most populous town, which is Dunfermline, which has a population of about 55,000. Okay, so these are massive figures, massive figures. Now you could say, okay, Alistair, well, remember, people did leave, so what about the net figure? Well, the net figure is, that still gives us a figure of 47,700. Let's just say 48,000. That's basically the exact population of Inverness. which Wikipedia tells us is 47,790. It's almost the same population as Perth, which is 47,350, or Kilmarnock, which is 47,000, or it's more than Ayr, which comes in about 46,000. So even if you look at the net figure of immigrants from abroad into Scotland, that's still a town the size of Inverness or Perth or Kilmarnock or more than Ayr in 12 months. And remember, that's the figure going back to June 23. So there's been another year since. And if my bus is anything to go by, the numbers will be considerably more than even that. So these are huge numbers. And have you seen that on the news? What you've probably seen on the news is the SNP and Labour going on about how Scotland's population's declining. We need more people so that they can help pay the pensions for the elderly. That's all you'll hear from them. Okay, you won't actually hear that. No, Scotland's population is exploding, and for the last period that we have, more people came into Scotland from abroad than Scotland's 5th most populous town. And as far as net immigration is concerned, exactly the population of Inverness. So Scotland's population is not declining, it is hugely growing at a rate which is more than we can service with housing. It's more than the public services can cope with, and it has serious impacts for our public safety as well. And so that's what we need to be hearing. You won't be hearing that from the mainstream media channels. That's why you tune in to A Force for Good to hear about these things. And we're certainly going to be making sure that as many people as we can tell will know about this, because the government, by which I mean the British government and also the SNP administration, they just want to keep this silent and hope that nobody points it out. And we had an entire budget today, okay, with Rachel Reeves talking away about raising funds, trying to get the household budget basically sorted. Well, how on earth can you sort the household budget when the door to your home is wide open and there's people coming in demanding food, demanding shelter, demanding medical treatment, demanding public services? I mean, we put out a tweet today on Twitter saying you may as well just try and empty the Thames with a bucket. It would make more sense. Okay, so you cannot, as we always say, you cannot mop the floor until you turn off the tap. You can't put your house in order until you've swept the floor and mopped up the overflow. You need control on all of these things. And Rachel Reeves went through her entire speech and never once did she mention the huge numbers that are coming into the country. 1.2 million came in year ending 2023. 1.2 million came in year ending 2022. Ridiculous numbers. And to try to put together a budget without comprehending, without acknowledging, without getting that under control, first of all, is a complete fool's errand. Let's have a look at what you guys are saying here. Stephen says, why does the UK need such a large figure of incomers. The data shows that most are unskilled and low skilled. What's the real purpose for this influx of new population? David says, we need to send them back to France or England. I don't think the English would thank you for that, but certainly send them back to France and from whence they originated. Steady Eddie believes it might be weaponized mass migration, demographic replacement. Call it what you will. Oksana wonders why they come to Scotland. Surely it's too cold for most people. Send them back south. There seems to be a consensus building here that we need to send them back to England. Steady Eddie says we're all under occupation and under systematic attack. It does feel like it. It absolutely does. Yes, England's got enough, Catherine. They absolutely do. Yes, send your answer, folks, to contact@aforceforgood for your copy of a wee book for the Union. By answering that question, the inventor of the bouncing bomb died on this day. What was his name? Okay. So we've been doing a lot of work on this particular matter, which is to say what we're calling territorial sovereignty, which is looking at mass immigration into the United Kingdom basically since the Blair years. But in order to put it into some kind of perspective, what we have had to do is to find out, well, what were the figures, prior to 1997? And we did do an article came out about 10 days ago, looking at long-term immigration figures into the UK. And we looked at the figures from 1947 each year right up until 1997, but also right up until the present day. And what we decided to do was to take the average between the end of war, 1947, up to the end of the year that Blair took over, that period, and find the average for the gross number who came in. Now, remember, there's always going to be people leaving. And so for many of those years, the net migration, the immigration minus emigration, was actually a minus figure. It didn't necessarily feel like it at the time with the changing demographics, but there were more people leaving for many of these years than coming in. And then after Blair turbocharged mass immigration, the situation changed completely. So now there's huge numbers coming in. There's also large numbers leaving, but there's massive net, and there's huge gross immigration. There's 1.2 million, as I said there, in both 2022 and 2023. So we did find the average. You can find that article where we explain it all at aforceforgood.uk/blog. And we published another one this week, where we didn't just take the numbers of long-term immigrants coming in, we actually looked at the numbers which were accepted for settlement. And we'll put that article out in the threads as well, and also in the description box below. And so the accepted for settlement figures are different from the immigration figures coming in. Sorry, the long-term immigration figures coming in. There's two different figures But we found that the average accepted for settlement per year between 1960 to 1997 was 60,000 per year. Now, after 1997, it doubled, and it's been doubled ever since. It's well over 120,000 accepted for settlement. I hate to think what the figures are for 2023, but I can tell you because I'll just pull up this article. I'll pull up this article right now. Here we go. Let's run through it. The historic norm accepted for settlement. We find the historic annual norm for immigrants accepted for settlement in the UK from 1960 up until 1997 inclusive, when numbers changed dramatically. Folks, this is really, really cutting edge research. It really helps to put this whole thing into some kind of context. Here we explain the difference between long-term immigration and accepted for settlement figures. We explain how you get accepted for settlement, which is also known as indefinite leave to remain. We show why the figures are different from the annual entry figures. And here, in this very interesting table, we list the total numbers of people each year who were given settlement. And in this table here, we calculate the numbers and the average between 1960 and 1997. And for completion, we bring it right up until 2023. And yes, it was around about 120,000 given settlement in 2023, which is double the figure, the average figure for those given settlement between 1960 and 1997. And indeed, the yearly average of people given settlement since the Tony Blair New Labour year of 1997, the average every year since then, right up until last year, was 123,711, over double the average prior to Tony Blair taking power. Over double the average between 1960 and 1997 inclusive. And so converting this information into policy, we can say this. We can say that there was an average of around 60,000 people per year accepted for settlement in the UK in the period 1960 to 1997 inclusive, prior to immigration taking off. And we can use this figure as a guideline for numbers going forward. Either we can say that that's the figure we need to get back to, that's the historic norm, which should be the guideline for those accepted for settlement each year. And we can also say that this should also guide the annual long-term gross immigration figures of people allowed into the country in the first place, whether or not they are eventually granted settlement. So these are the figures that we've discovered. I do urge anybody interested to go to our website, aforceforgood.uk/blog. You'll find a lot of material there. The reason we're really putting a lot of this material out is because it's going to form a large part of our new book, which will be volume 2 of A Big Book for the Union. And we are aiming to distill the immigration restriction message into a comprehensive and concise, coherent and comprehensible form in several short, info-packed, policy-focused and easily digested chapters. And it is going to be a cracker, and it should be out, God willing, in time for Christmas. It will be available from amazon.co.uk. And that will be the volume 2 in this series, A Big Book for the Union. This is volume 1, which we called One Big Country. And this is also available from Amazon. Please do go to amazon.co.uk, search for One Big Country, and you'll find it. It's only $9.99 postage free if you're on Prime. And folks, please also do check out our shop. Now, in the background, you'll see this flag. It says, "Lest we forget," and that's John 15:13, which is that the verse about laying down your life for your brothers. And we've got one of these left in our warehouse. So if you want it, go straight to aforceforgood.uk/shop-1. It's 5 foot by 3 foot, and it's got 2 metal gimlets for flying from a flagpole. It's a really attractive one, but we've only got one left. And other things that we sell at this remembrance time are, let's bring up a picture of our, well, let's just fire this out. Here it is. Here is your home here, defend it. That's a World War I recruiting poster, and that's available at the shop. aforceforgood.uk/shop-1. A really nice item that it commemorates, well, the 110th year of the beginning of that catastrophic conflict, which affected every single family in the British Isles. And we also have a Battle of Britain flag, which we have. There you go. We've got one of those left also at our shop. And as I say, that flag there, one of those left. So folks, if you want those for this remembrance period, please do check them out. Now, it's the top of the hour. I am told there is no winner today. That's okay. We can hold the prize over for the following week. Thank you, Stephen. Stephen's talking about the research there that we did on the numbers coming into the country. David says we can always reverse the trend and change the law. Absolutely. Absolutely. It just requires the political will, and it requires politicians who are not beholden to vested interests. It requires politicians who are nationalist in orientation, in the sense of believing in their country, not politicians who would far rather care about other countries and who send us off to fight and die for other countries, or who promote the wars of other countries, or send money to other countries' wars and so on. Everybody who does that, every politician who does that, is a slave to their masters who are forcing them to say and do that. And we need to, that's what's wrong ultimately with our country, is that our politicians don't represent us. They represent their masters, who should be us, but unfortunately is not us once they get into power. Anyway, stop ranting, Alistair. You'll have time to talk about that at another time. We are unfortunately out of time today. It's the top of the hour. I want to thank everybody who sent in their comments and their messages and their greetings. Thank you very much for that. We will be back next week, which will be an interesting one because that will be the day after the American presidential election. So we'll either know who's won it or we'll have to wait for days until the Americans figure out how to count, which they have great trouble often doing. And we'll also have to be very careful what we say on YouTube because you're not allowed to question American election results on YouTube. And so we certainly wouldn't do something like that at all. Now, let me just say, folks, hopefully then see you next week. It just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next time.